US President Joe Biden says a major terrorist threat to the world has been taken out. Abu Ibrahim al-Qurayshi, the leader of the so-called Islamic State, was killed in Syria during an overnight raid by American special forces. Biden says the terror group commander was responsible for multiple atrocities, including genocide.
He was responsible for the recent brutal attack on a prison in northeast Syria holding ISIS fighters, which was swiftly addressed by our brave partners in the Syrian Democratic Forces. He was the driving force behind the genocide of the Yazidi people in northwestern Iraq in 2014. We all remember the gut-wrenching stories, mass slaughters that wiped out entire villages, thousands of women and young girls sold into slavery, rape used as a weapon of war. And thanks to the bravery of our troops, this horrible terrorist leader is no more.
US officials say a fierce gun battle took place around the compound housing al-Qurayshi, including helicopter gunfire. The raid took place in the city of Atme in Idlib province in northwestern Syria, one of the last remaining hotbeds of ISIS fighters. The target was al-Qurayshi, who took over as head of the group after its former leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, died during a US operation in the same area in 2019. The White House says al-Qurayshi detonated a bomb that killed him and members of his own family. There were no US casualties, but up to 13 people, including women and children, were reportedly killed during the raid. Well, for more on this story, let's now cross over to DC to our correspondent Ray Suarez. Ray, good to see you. So President Biden is calling this a successful mission, but up to 13 people have been killed. Has there been criticism of these civilian deaths?
Well, Mariam, seemingly in anticipation of just those kind of questions, the American president went into great detail during the news conference that you just saw excerpts of, describing the raid and describing the methods and the operational details. He wanted to show that this method for attacking the compound was chosen rather than a drone strike or a remote strike using a smart bomb or missile. They wanted to get in close, the president said, to minimize civilian casualties. And then he went on further, as we just heard a moment ago, to explain that the casualties on the ground at that site in Atma, near the Turkish-Syrian border, was detonated by the suspect himself, by the target of the attack himself, so that, if anything, the responsibility for those civilian deaths is his. The helicopters that came in over the compound made announcements over loudspeakers in Arabic, telling people to clear the area, to leave the adjacent buildings, and said, if you do not leave, you will die. There was an attempt, apparently, to minimize civilian casualties on the ground. Mariam?
Right now, ISIS, they've been trying to mount a resurgence. Last month, they staged a prison break-in in Syria, freeing members of their group. But will the death of al-Qurayshi deal a fatal blow to the group?
Well, American intelligence forces have been watching the ISIS movements very closely. There was a lot of speculation late in the Trump administration that depriving ISIS of territory, taking away that vast swath of land that it controlled on both sides of the Syria-Iraq border, in effect neutralized ISIL as a fighting force. But there were intelligence analysts, both inside and outside government, who said no, in fact, the group would even be made more dangerous by the deprivation of territory, by being constantly on the run and more desperate and more willing to take large numbers of lives in raids and actions. So American intelligence sources have been watching movement, watching activity very closely, and there was an anticipation that they were ready to take the field again and start stepping up their attacks. This man killed today by American forces is known to have been an expert in operations in the field. Not much on the propaganda front, not much on the high public profile front like his predecessors. So, yes, they were worried about new attacks in American intelligence.